If you were a part of the previous podcast, it was really part one of two parts. This is the second part. Now you can go back and listen to its very brief podcast under 10 minutes. And if you put me on 1.5 speed, you can take a lot of the Southern accent out and it'll go a lot faster. You can listen to this really, really quickly, but you really need to hear part one to get the foundation of what we're going to cover in part two of understanding the decline of the Southern Baptist Convention. My name is Thom Rainer, and this is the Church Answers podcast, and we're looking at the data of the largest Protestant denomination in the United States. That's not nearly as large as it used to be, and we're trying to answer the question, why? You can go back and see the numbers and hear my commentary on the numbers in the previous podcast, but we're answering the question, why? Thank you for Belay Solutions for being our sponsor, our founding sponsor, our exclusive sponsor, our wonderful sponsor. And thank you for providing those types of virtual workers, assistants, and bookkeepers, and webmasters, and just so many ways that Belay helps organizations. They can help yours. They sure have helped the organizations I've been a part of. I have actually had Belay workers in 2 organizations of which I have been a part of, and it has been tremendous. They have a download called 25 Tasks. A pastor can delegate to an assistant. You can download it from the show notes, or you can look at belaysolutions.com/Thom Rainer. Okay, let's go back to where we were. We were looking at some pretty sober news, and we were looking at the numbers, the numerical realities of the Southern Baptist Convention in the previous podcast. I gave my caveat because I can always expect someone to say it's not the people who are in the building, it's the people are the church. I get that. I've heard it a whole lot. But people gather. People gather for groups. People gather for worship services, and they gather somewhere, and it's usually a building. We're going to be talking about the Southern Baptist Convention, not because it is the only denomination we should talk about, but because it's the largest. And it mirrors so much, this evangelical denomination mirrors so much of what is happening to churches in the United States, because this is more about local churches than denominations, because the numbers that we shared with you, and we'll repeat them again in just a moment, those numbers reflect the reality of the churches. It's not like we're giving you the numbers of some bureaucratic administrative body. We are giving you the numbers of the churches and what they represent. Okay, just as a reminder, we use 2019 as the base, which you should when you're looking at where churches are today, the pre-pandemic number. And you don't look at 2020 because many churches were closed during that time. You don't look at 2021 because you're beginning to see some regathering that has not fully been captured yet. 2022 is what we call the regathered state. And so you compare 2019 to 2022, okay? Here's what we found. Worship attendance in Southern Baptist churches was down 27.5%. In-person small groups were down 28%. Baptisms, the measure of conversions, people who are becoming followers of Christ, down 24%. I'm not going to go into those numbers in the same detail as I did in the first podcast. I just want to answer the question, why? And here's the reality. I don't have all the answers. And this brief podcast is not going to come close to scratching the surface, but I just wanted to give 3 broad stroke issues of which you should be aware that I think are very effective. One of these is the small group system that grew Southern Baptist and a lot of other denominations is not being emphasized in many of these churches. For the Southern Baptists, it was Sunday school. And I don't think you have to have a Sunday school. I'm not that traditional, but you need to have some type of small group. And you need to be encouraging people to move to those groups. And it could be called a community group, a home group, a small group, a life group, our Sunday school class. They have become de-emphasized. They were primarily responsible for shutting the back door. In the early days, Sunday school is responsible for the front door and people come to Christ. But someone that gets in a group is 5 times more likely to be assimilated in your church than someone who attends worship only. 5 times. And so this emphasis is gone. We see that as one of the reasons that the Southern Baptist Convention is not as numerically healthy anyway, probably otherwise, because its churches have a wide open back door And when Sunday school became de-emphasized, or whatever the group system is today, that became one of the telltale things that we saw. The back door was wide open. Secondly, evangelism is not emphasized in most Southern Baptist churches. They're called a Great Commission denomination. Most evangelical denominations are. These churches are evangelical. You would think that reaching people with the gospel would be a priority. It's not in many churches. Maybe a little bit of lip service, but it is not. And we're talking about the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention more than a denominational body. One of the reasons that we introduced the Hope Initiative is to help churches get a 30-day jump start in prayer and evangelism. It's proven to be so incredibly effective. But baptisms are down in the Southern Baptist Convention. I can remember, I'm old, I can remember when our goal was to get 500,000 baptisms a year. In 2019, it was 235,000. In 2022, it was down to 180,000. Unbelievable. Evangelism is not an emphasis in many Southern Baptist churches. Third, and I'll stop after three, but there's so many other explanations, but these are three of the big ones in my humble opinion. Number three, like many churches, the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention, again, not all of them, but many of them, are distracted. There's so many things. There's within the denomination, there's disagreements on one thing after another, and they may be things that are very important. But it's like every year we're going to have our annual disagreement. There's going to be some annual disagreement on something. And it's not limited to the SBC, and other churches are doing it. We're spending so much time talking about what we are against. We are not doing enough about what we should be for, which is seeing people come to Christ. These distractions, again, I am not suggesting that any of them are minor matters, and I don't have a magical solution. I just simply know that our first priority, one of our first priorities as believers and as churches, should be reaching people with the gospel. And we have been distracted, and we are looking in a lot of other places. I love the fact that Southern Baptists and a lot of evangelical denominations are really focused on doctrine, but quite frankly, faith without the works of evangelism is dead. Faith without works is dead. And what we're seeing is doctrinal purity, but not evangelistic priority. And as a result, many of the churches are going in the way of decline. These are three. They're big three, but these are three. Small group is not being emphasized, number one. Evangelism is not being emphasized, number two, within the churches. And number three, what is being emphasized are a boatload of distractions. You put those three together, you have a declining church. You have declining churches within a same body, you have a declining denomination. At least on a macro scale, and I know I've oversimplified it, there are cultural issues all throughout here, the demographic issues that I could have addressed, but these three issues, I think, are at the heart of what's going on in many of our churches. It's a sad commentary, but I serve a God of all possibilities, and I believe he's going to do great things. No, I see what he's doing. Getting back these reports from the Hope Initiative, I see what he's doing. Once again, thank you for being with us. Remember, we have 3 podcasts available for you this week, as we do every week. 2 of them, part 1 and part 2 of the SBC. You can see the link in this podcast to the previous podcast, part 1, so that you can have these 2 together. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for Belay for being our sponsor. And thank you, Belay, for providing that great download, 25 tasks a pastor can delegate to an assistant. We'll see you in the next podcast. Hey, folks, this is a PS to our podcast. We got some exciting stuff that we want to offer you absolutely for free. Sam, when you think about predictive factors in a church's growth, if you take out demographics, what are some things that come to mind? Just 2. I mean, don't give me a list of 10. Just 2 or 3 things that come to mind on predictive growth of a church.
Well, evangelism and whether the church is doing it or not.
Bingo.
And then I will add, is it an ongoing evangelism emphasis?
Double bingo. Well. And maybe something about leadership and their commitment to that. So all of the above.
Evangelistic churches have evangelistic pastors. Is the staff, is the lead pastor doing the work themselves.
We have a free download for you, and it's actually a sheet that you can self-score. You answer 20 questions, anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and we come back and we predict what your growth rate is going to be for the next year in worship attendance. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a good tool. There's a link to that for the attendance predictor. Look in the show notes. You'll absolutely love it. That's cool. We'll see you soon.